I'd always thought of my life with Clara as a steady rhythm, like the hum of a well-tuned engine. 20 years married, 2 kids grown and off to college, and a house in the suburbs that smelled of her lavender candles and my coffee-stained mornings. She was the kind of woman who could make a room feel warmer just by walking into it. Petite, with hazel eyes that crinkled when she laughed, and a voice that carried a melody even when she was scolding me for leaving socks on the floor. We weren't perfect, but we were us. That's what I told myself every night as I kissed her forehead before sleep claimed us both. It started subtly, the way a crack forms in a windshield, small, ignorable, until it spiders out. She'd linger in the kitchen after dinner, her phone glowing in her hands, thumbs dancing across the screen. "Work stuff," she'd say when I asked, her smile tight, eyes darting away. Clara managed a boutique downtown, a little place that sold overpriced scarves and artisanal soaps. I never questioned her late-night texts before. Why would I? Trust was the foundation we'd built everything on. But then the late nights stretched longer. She'd slip out of bed, claiming insomnia, and I'd hear the soft clack of her laptop keys from the living room. One Tuesday, I woke to an empty bed at 3 a.m. The sheets on her side were cold, and a faint light spilled from under the bedroom door. I shuffled out, rubbing sleep from my eyes, and found her on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at her screen. "You okay?" I mumbled, voice thick with grogginess. She snapped the laptop shut, her face paling for a split second before that familiar smile slid into place. "Just couldn't sleep, Tom. Go back to bed." Her tone was sweet, but there was an edge to it, a sharpness I couldn't place. I nodded, too tired to push, and shuffled back to the dark. The next morning, she was all sunshine. Pancakes sizzling on the griddle, humming some tune I didn't recognize. But her phone buzzed incessantly on the counter, and when she glanced at it, her lips twitched in a way that wasn't quite a smile. I asked who it was. "Just Sarah," she said, naming her assistant at the shop. I believed her because doubting Clara felt like doubting gravity. Still, something gnawed at me, a quiet itch I couldn't scratch. I started watching her more. How she'd angle her phone away when I walked by, how her laughter sounded different, sharper, when she took calls in the other room. It wasn't evidence, not yet, but it was enough to make the air in our home feel heavier, like a storm was rolling in and I was the only one who couldn't see the clouds. Weeks passed, and that itch grew into a splinter lodged under my skin. Clara's boutique was doing well, too well, maybe. She'd come home with stories of new customers, her eyes bright with a kind of excitement I hadn't seen in years. I was proud of her, or I tried to be. But pride doesn't explain why she started wearing perfume again, a musky scent she hadn't touched since our dating days, or why her wardrobe shifted to tighter blouses and heels that clicked louder on our hardwood floors. "Reinvention," she called it one night, twirling in front of the mirror. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Then came the photo. I was cleaning the garage, looking for a wrench, when I knocked over a box of old receipts she'd asked me to sort. A Polaroid fluttered out, landing face up on the concrete. It was Clara, laughing, her arm around a man I didn't know. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a grin that showed too many teeth. They were outside her shop, the sign visible in the background. On the back, in her handwriting, * first day with Jay. Couldn't have done it without him. * no date, no context. My stomach twisted. Who was Jay? A new hire? A friend? I stuffed the photo in my pocket, telling myself it was nothing, but my hands shook as I finished the chore. That night, I asked her about it casually, holding the picture up while she chopped vegetables. "Found this in the garage." "Who's Jay?" Her knife paused mid-slice, just for a heartbeat, before she laughed. A little too loud. "Oh, that's James, the contractor who redid the shop's interior last year. I must have forgotten to toss that." She took the photo, tore it in half, and dropped it in the trash. Silly keepsake. Her explanation made sense, but her fingers lingered on the knife, and her eyes didn't meet mine. I let it go, or tried to, but James stuck in my head like a song I couldn't unhear. The next day, I drove by her boutique on my lunch break. I don't know why, curiosity maybe, or that splinter digging deeper. Through the window, I saw her behind the counter, laughing with a man. Tall, dark-haired, broad shoulders. He leaned close, too close, and she didn't pull away. My chest tightened. I didn't go in. I drove home, the image burning behind my eyes, and sat in our quiet living room until she came home, her perfume filling the space like an unwelcome guest. I didn't confront her that day. Couldn't. Words felt like stones in my throat, heavy and useless. Instead, I watched. I became a shadow in my own life, cataloging every shift in her behavior. She started leaving earlier for work, claiming inventory days, and coming home later, her hair slightly mussed, her cheeks flushed. She'd kiss me quick, distracted, and dive into stories about the shop that sounded rehearsed. I nodded, smiled, played the part of the oblivious husband while my mind churned. One night, she left her phone on the counter while she showered. It buzzed, and I glanced at the screen. A text from Jay. No last name, just the initial. Asterisk, missed you today. Tomorrow? Asterisk, my pulse roared in my ears. I swiped it open, unlocked, a rare slip on her part, and scrolled. Messages stretched back months. Casual at first, then warmer, then intimate in a way that made my vision blur. Asterisk, can't stop thinking about you. Your laugh is my favorite sound. Meet me after closing? Asterisk, no replies from her showed. They must have been deleted, but his words painted a picture I couldn't unsee. I put the phone back, hands trembling, and sat there until she emerged, towel-wrapped and humming. She didn't notice my silence, or if she did, she didn't care. That night, I lay awake beside her, her breathing soft and even, while I imagined James. His hands, his voice, his presence in spaces I'd thought were mine. The betrayal wasn't just in the messages. It was in her ease, her happiness, the way she'd shed our life like an old coat. I didn't sleep. I planned. The next morning, I called in sick and drove to her shop. I parked across the street, hidden by a row of trees, and waited. At noon, he arrived, James, unmistakable from the photo, striding in like he owned the place. Clara greeted him with a smile that used to be mine, her hand brushing his arm. They disappeared into the back room, the blinds snapping shut. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, until my knuckles turned white. Proof wasn't a question anymore. It was a wound, raw and gaping. I didn't storm in. I didn't scream or break things. I went home, cooked dinner, her favorite, lasagna, and greeted her with a smile when she walked through the door. Rough day? I asked, pouring her wine. She nodded, launching into a story about a shipment mix-up, her words polished and hollow. I listened, nodding, while my mind replayed the back room, the blinds, the way she'd touched him. Every bite of lasagna tasted like ash, but I ate, laughed, played the husband she expected. She didn't suspect a thing. That week, I dug deeper. I borrowed a friend's login for a tracking app and synced it to her phone one night while she slept. By morning, I had her movements, a map of lies. She wasn't at the shop half the time she claimed. Coffee shops, a motel on the edge of town, a park 2 cities over, places she'd never mentioned. I cross-checked dates with James's texts, and the pattern locked into place. She was building a life I wasn't part of, and I was funding it, her car, her clothes, the boutique I'd co-signed the loan for. I started following her myself. I'd take errands when she left, tailing her in my truck, staying just out of sight. I saw them together, holding hands in a diner, her head on his shoulder in a park, their laughter cutting through me like glass. James wasn't some fling. He was a fixture, a replacement. I photographed it all, my phone filling with evidence I didn't need but couldn't stop collecting. Each image was a brick in the wall I was building, a wall she'd crash into soon enough. At home, I kept up the act. I complimented her new blouse, asked about her day, kissed her goodnight. She leaned into it, oblivious, while I memorized every lie. I wasn't just angry, I was cold, calculating, a man I didn't recognize. Revenge wasn't a word I lingered on yet, but it was there, simmering, waiting for shape. I'd give her the rope, let her tie the noose herself. She'd never see it coming. The final piece fell into place on a rainy Thursday. Clara said she was meeting Sarah for drinks after work. A girls' night, she called it, her voice light and convincing. I nodded, waved her off, and tracked her phone to a house I didn't know, 30 minutes away. I drove there, rain streaking the windshield, and parked down the street. It was a craftsman-style place, cozy, with a pickup in the driveway I recognized from the shop. James's house. I didn't knock. I circled to the back, where a window glowed through the downpour. Through the glass, I saw them, not just together, but entwined in a way that turned my stomach. Clara was draped across a piano, her blouse unbuttoned, laughing as James played a clumsy tune with one hand, the other tracing her skin. It wasn't the intimacy that broke me. It was the absurdity, the theatricality of it. She'd always mocked my attempts at romance, called them cheesy. Yet here she was, living some melodramatic fantasy with him. A piano, of all things, a prop in her betrayal, as if our life was too mundane to compete. I stood there, rain soaking me, watching until the song ended and they collapsed into each other, oblivious to the world. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a reinvention, a rejection of me so complete it felt surreal. I didn't cry or rage. I walked back to my truck, dripping, and drove home. The house was silent when I got there, her lavender scent mocking me from every corner. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the photos on my phone, and let the cold settle deeper. That night I didn't sleep. I planned. Revenge wouldn't be quick or loud. It would be meticulous, cruel, a mirror to her betrayal. She'd built this new life on my trust, my stability. I'd dismantle it piece by piece, let her feel the ground give way. The piano lingered in my mind, a symbol of her escape. I'd make sure it played her ruin. The rain didn't stop that night, and neither did my thoughts. Sitting at the kitchen table, the photos on my phone glowing in the dark, I felt something solidify inside me. A purpose sharper than anger, colder than grief. Clara had rewritten our life into some ridiculous play with James, that piano her stage. I'd give her an encore she'd never forget. Revenge wasn't about confrontation, not yet. It was about control, about taking everything she'd built with him and turning it to ash in her hands. I started with what I knew. The boutique was her pride, her little empire, but it rested on my signature. 5 years ago, I'd co-signed the loan to get it off the ground. She'd begged me then, her eyes wide with dreams, and I'd said yes because I loved her. Now, that love was a weapon. I dug through our filing cabinet, past tax returns and warranties, until I found the loan agreement. My name was still on it, tied to the lease, the utilities, the whole operation. She'd never bothered to refinance it solo. Sloppy, Clara. Very sloppy. Next, I turned to James. I didn't know much, but I had his truck's license plate from the photos, clear as day in one shot outside her shop. A quick call to an old buddy at the DMV, a favor cashed in from years back, got me his full name, James Michael Harrow. A contractor, like she'd said, but not some small-time handyman. He owned a business, Harrow Renovations, with a website boasting glossy photos of remodeled kitchens and storefronts, her boutique among them. I cross-referenced the tracking data from her phone with his company's job logs, public records I pulled online. Their meetings didn't match his projects. He was her project. I spent hours that night, fueled by coffee and spite, mapping their world. Bank accounts, social media, mutual contacts, every thread I could pull. Clara's boutique had a separate business account I still had access to. She'd never changed the login from when I helped with the books. Small withdrawals caught my eye. Coffee shops, dinners, a motel charge she'd labeled supplies. James's name popped up in a Venmo transaction, $50 with a piano emoji. It was almost funny how careless they were. I printed everything, stashing it in a lockbox under the guest bed. Evidence wasn't enough, I needed leverage. By dawn, I had a plan. I'd unravel her life from the roots up, but she'd feel it slow, like a vine tightening around her throat. The boutique, her freedom, her precious James. They'd all crumble, and she'd never see my hand in it until the end. Clara came home the next evening, her hair damp from the rain, her smile bright as she chattered about her girls' night. I nodded, stirred the soup I'd made, and asked how Sarah was. "Oh, great," she said. Too quick, her eyes flicking to her phone. I didn't push. I didn't need to. The tracking app showed she'd been at James's house until 2 a.m., and the lie sat between us like a third guest at the table. She ate, oblivious, while I watched her, memorizing the ease she wore like a mask. Monday morning, I called the bank. Posing as a concerned cosigner, I asked about the boutique's loan status. The clerk confirmed it. Still active, payments current, my name tied to every dime. What if I wanted to pull my support? I asked casual. A pause, then, "You'd need to notify us in writing. It'd trigger a review, could force a refinance or foreclosure if she can't cover it solo." I thanked him, hung up, and drafted the letter. I didn't send it, not yet. It was a loaded gun, safety on, waiting in my desk. Next, I hit James. His business relied on reputation, 5-star reviews on Yelp, testimonials from happy clients. I created a burner email and posted a review. Harrow botched my kitchen. Shoddy work, missed deadlines, overcharged. Steer clear. I kept it vague, believable. Then another, from a different account. Unprofessional. Flirted with my wife during the job. Petty, sure, but it planted seeds. By noon, his rating dipped half a star. Small, but noticeable. I smiled for the first time in days. That night, Clara complained about a slow day at the shop. "People are so picky lately," she sighed, sipping wine. I murmured sympathy, hiding my grin. I'd stopped by her boutique's social media, left a few anonymous comments. Nothing wild, just enough to stir doubt. Heard the owners distracted these days. Qualities slipping. She hadn't seen them yet, but she would. I wanted her unsettled, off balance, before the real blow. She went to bed early, claiming a headache. I stayed up, refining the plan. The boutique was her lifeline. James was her escape. I'd choke both, slow and deliberate, until she had nowhere to turn. A week later, I found the piano. Clara mentioned it offhand. A rare slip. Something about a friend selling furniture cheap. How she'd always wanted one for the house. "Maybe in the living room," she mused, stirring her coffee. I nodded, feigning interest, but my mind snapped to that night in the rain. Her sprawled across James's keys. It wasn't hypothetical. She was dreaming of bringing his world into mine, planting it like a trophy in our home. The gall of it lit a fire in me. I tracked it down. James had posted a listing on a local marketplace. Baby grand, good condition, $800. Moving soon, need gone. The photo matched what I'd seen through his window, down to the scratched leg. Moving soon? That was new. I dug into his digital footprint. Property records showed he'd put his house up for sale 2 days ago. A plan clicked into place, sharper than before. I'd buy the piano, but not as me. Using a fake name and a prepaid card. I messaged him, interested. "Can I see it?" He replied fast, eager, setting a time for the next day. I drove over, baseball cap low, cash in hand. James greeted me at the door, all charm, oblivious to who I was. The piano sat in his living room, a smug centerpiece. "She's a beauty," he said, running a hand over it. "Hate to let her go." "I bet you do," I thought, picturing Clara there. I haggled him down to $600, loaded it into a rented van, and drove off, his handshake still warm on my palm. I didn't take it home. I stashed it in a storage unit across town, locked tight. It wasn't enough to own it. I'd use it. Clara wanted that piano? She'd get it, but not how she imagined. It'd be her undoing, a symbol she'd choke on when the time came. For now, it waited silent, while I tightened the noose. Clara noticed the shift at the boutique first. "Customers are being weird," she said one night, frowning over her laptop. "Sales are down. I don't get it." I shrugged, flipping through a magazine I wasn't reading. "Economy's tough," I offered, bland as oatmeal. She didn't know about the comments I'd seeded online, the whispers I'd started through fake accounts. Shops overpriced. Owners never there. Nothing traceable. just enough to dent her momentum. The bank letter still sat in my desk, unsigned, but its shadow loomed. James felt it too. His Yelp page was a mess. More bad reviews, some from clients I'd invented, others from real people piling on. His phone buzzed during one of Clara's late shifts, and I heard her voice through the wall. Tense. "What do you mean canceled? We need that job." I sipped my beer, silent, as her world frayed. His sale fell through too. I'd called the realtor posing as a neighbor, hinted at issues with the property. No proof, just rumors, but buyers spook easy. He was stuck and she was tethered to him. At home, she grew jumpy. She'd check her phone obsessively, snap at me over nothing. Burnt toast, a misplaced remote. I stayed calm, maddeningly so, letting her unravel. "You okay?" I'd ask, all concern. She'd nod, tight-lipped, and retreat to her laptop. The tracking app showed her at James's more. Their meetings frantic now, not romantic. Good. I wanted them desperate, clinging to each other as it all slipped away. I mailed the bank letter that Friday, certified, requesting a loan review. The boutique's fate was in motion. Her credit wouldn't hold it alone. She'd find out soon, but not from me. I'd be the shoulder she cried on, the husband she'd underestimated. The bank called her Monday. I was in the garage, tinkering with a shelf, when she stormed in, face pale, voice shaking. "They're reviewing the loan, Tom. They might foreclose." How did this happen? I set down my hammer, met her eyes. "What do you mean?" She stammered about paperwork, my co-signature, how she thought it was sorted years ago. "Did you do something?" she asked, suspicion flickering. I shook my head, all innocence. "I haven't touched it, Clara. Maybe you missed a payment." She didn't buy it, but she had no proof. She stormed off, phone in hand, dialing someone. James, I'd bet. That night, she left for the shop, but the tracker showed James's address. I followed, parking a block away. Through the window, I saw them arguing, her pacing, him slumped on the couch. No piano now, just tension, raw and ugly. I snapped photos, more bricks for my wall. She came home at midnight, eyes red, claiming exhaustion. I made her tea, asked gentle questions she dodged. "It'll work out," I said, patting her hand. She nodded, distracted, while I hid my smile. James's business tanked harder. 2 big clients pulled out, spooked by the reviews. I'd emailed them anonymously, vague warnings about unreliability. His house sale stalled again. The realtor dropped him. Clara's boutique lost its weekend rush, her profits bleeding out. She leaned on me more, venting, oblivious to my hand in it. I listened, cooked, played the rock she needed while I sharpened the blade. The piano sat in storage, my ace. I'd unveil it soon, tie it to her ruin. She'd built her betrayal on music and lies. I'd make sure it played her out. Clara's world was shrinking, and she didn't even know I held the strings. The boutique's loan review dragged on. Letters from the bank piled up on the counter, unopened, as if ignoring them would make them vanish. She'd mutter about lawyers, refinancing, but her voice carried a tremor now, a crack in her confidence. James wasn't faring better. His business phone went to voicemail, his website's "Contact Us" page broken. I'd nudged a few more dominoes. Fake complaints to the Better Business Bureau. A whispered tip to a local blogger about shady contractors. Nothing big, just enough to keep him drowning. At home, she clung to me, a lifeline she didn't deserve. "I don't know what's happening, Tom," she'd say, head in her hands. I'd rub her shoulders, murmur comforts, all while picturing that piano, her laughter with him. The storage unit key burned in my pocket, a promise I'd kept silent. I'd rented a delivery truck under a friend's name, untraceable, and spent nights sanding the piano's finish, staining it a deep, unrecognizable cherry. It wasn't James's anymore. It was mine, reshaped for her reckoning. I waited for the right moment. It came when she announced a business trip to meet a supplier. And overnight, she said, her eyes avoiding mine. The tracker told the truth. James's house again. I let her go, kissed her goodbye, and called the bank. "I'm withdrawing my co-signature," I said, faxing the signed letter. The clerk warned it'd trigger immediate action. Perfect. Then I arranged the delivery. Anonymous, scheduled for the next morning at our address. The note attached read, Asterisk for Clara. A gift from someone who knows you best. Asterisk no signature, just mystery. She'd be home when it arrived, back from her lie. I'd be at work, watching via a camera I'd hidden in the living room. An old nanny cam from the kids' toddler days. Dusted off and synced to my phone. The boutique would falter without my backing. James was already sinking. The piano would be the final note, a chord she couldn't unhear. I slept soundly that night, the first time in weeks, dreaming of her face when it all clicked into place. I left early, a fake errand, and watched the feed from a coffee shop. Clara pulled into the driveway at 9 a.m., hair mussed, her overnight bag slung over her shoulder. She looked tired, frayed, good. The truck rolled up minutes later, 2 guys unloading the piano, its cherry gleam catching the sun. She froze on the porch, staring as they hauled it inside. "What's this?" she asked, voice tinny through the cam. "Delivery for you, ma'am," one said, handing her the note. She read it, frowned, and waved them off, alone with the thing. I zoomed in. She circled it, hesitant, then touched the keys. A soft, clumsy pluck. Her lips parted, confusion deepening. She didn't recognize it yet, not fully, but I saw the flicker in her eyes, the ghost of memory. She sat, played a few notes, then stopped, hands trembling. The phone rang. Bank? I timed it, and she answered, her face crumpling as the clerk's words hit. Foreclosure process started, cosigner withdrew. Immediate payment due. She argued, pleaded, then hung up, sinking onto the piano bench, staring at the note. I sipped my coffee, pulse steady. She called James next, frantic. "They're taking the shop, James." Tom pulled out. "How did he?" His voice was muffled, panicked. "My clients are gone too. Someone's screwing me over, Clara." She didn't connect it, not yet, but the seed was planted. I watched her pace, clutch her hair, the piano looming behind her like a judge. She tried me, voicemail. "Tom, call me. Something's wrong." I didn't. Let her stew. By noon, she was a wreck, calling lawyers, banks, James again. The camera caught every tear, every curse. The piano sat silent, a monument to her betrayal, and I knew she felt it, even if she couldn't name it. I'd give her the truth soon, but not today. Today was for watching her fall apart. She didn't sleep that night. I saw it on the cam, her pacing the living room, the piano a dark shape in the corner. She tried me 10 times, left messages I ignored. "Tom, we need to talk. Please." Her voice cracked, desperate. I stayed at a motel, letting her simmer. By morning, she'd called a locksmith to change the locks, thinking I'd abandoned her. Maybe. Fine. I didn't need the house yet. I showed up at noon, key still working. She hadn't finished the job. She was at the kitchen table, coffee cold, eyes red. "Where were you?" she demanded. I shrugged, calm. "Needed space." "What's with the piano?" Her breath hitched. "Someone sent it." "And the bank?" "Tom, did you pull the loan?" I met her gaze, unblinking. "Why would I?" She faltered, then broke. "I've been seeing someone. James." "I'm sorry, I held up a hand. "Don't." She stared, stunned. I didn't need her words. I'd seen it all. "How long?" I asked, voice flat. 6 months, she whispered. "It's over now. I swear." Lies. "The tracker showed her at his place last night." I nodded, let her think I believed her. "We'll figure it out," I said, soft, and she sagged with relief. "Fool." I left, promising to return later. She didn't know I'd already moved the lockbox, photos, bank records, proof to the truck. Or that I'd emailed James from a burner. Asterisk. "She's done with you. Check her boutique's books." Asterisk attached were screenshots of her siphoning money for their trysts, faked to look real. He'd doubt her now, turn on her. The piano stayed, a splinter in her mind, and I tightened the noose. James called her that afternoon. I heard it through the cam, his voice roaring. You used me, Clara? The money, where'd it go? She denied it, sobbing, but the seed was sown. He hung up, and she collapsed, the piano mocking her from across the room. I drove to his house, left an envelope on his porch. Photos of them, the motel receipts, a note. Asterisk, she played us both. Asterisk unsigned, but he'd know her handwriting from the Polaroid. Let them tear each other apart. The boutique closed that week. Bank seized it, locks changed. Clara's car went next, repossessed. I'd stopped payments on the lease she didn't know I controlled. She called me, begging. Tom, help me. I'll fix this. I agreed to meet, brought the lockbox. At the house, I laid it out, photos, texts, tracking logs. Her face went white. You knew. I nodded. And the piano? I smiled cold. James's. I bought it, sanded it down, delivered it. She lunged for me, screaming, but I stepped back. You wanted music, Clara. Play it. She didn't touch the keys, just stared, broken. I walked out, leaving her with nothing but the truth and that cherry-stained ghost. James texted her one last time. I'd hacked his account. Asterisk, we're done. Asterisk, she'd lost him too. I didn't stay to watch the end. The house was hers to lose. Mortgage in her name, payments she couldn't make. I moved into a rental, sold my truck, started fresh. Word spread, James's business folded, his house foreclosed. Clara sold the piano for pennies, then the house vanishing to some cheap apartment. I heard she tried calling, but I'd blocked her. The revenge wasn't loud or bloody. It was quiet, surgical. A symphony of ruin played on her own keys. She'd wanted a new life. I gave her one, stripped bare. I kept one photo, the Polaroid, torn and taped back together, a reminder of what trust cost. The silence now is mine, and it's sweeter than any song she ever played.